Centuries ago, Kaulder and his fellow warriors live as witch hunters, tracking the source of a terrible curse that has fallen over their village. The Black Plague has already wiped out countless families, and the hunters believe one powerful witch is responsible for bringing death to their people. Their search leads them deep into the heart of a dark forest, where they finally discover the truth. The Witch Queen herself is hiding there, and she is the one behind the plague. The moment they reach her lair, the Queen shows how terrifying her power truly is. She attacks one of the soldiers first, forcing a swarm of insects to burst out from inside his mouth, killing him horribly. Before the others can even recover from the shock, she raises several undead creatures from the ground and sends them toward the hunters. Kaulder reacts instantly, setting his sword ablaze and using the fire to hold the monsters back. A brutal fight breaks out. His companions struggle against the cursed creatures, while Kaulder pushes forward, determined to reach the Witch Queen herself. As he moves closer, Kaulder suddenly notices a child's toy lying on the ground. The sight freezes him for a moment because it reminds him of the family he lost, but then he understands what is happening. The Queen is trying to weaken him through an illusion. Kaulder forces himself back to reality and attacks her directly. The Witch Queen strikes back with her dark magic, throwing him through an opening in the giant tree and trapping his body with twisted roots. But Kaulder refuses to surrender. He ignites his sword once more, causing the flames to spread wildly through the tree. With the fire raging around them, he drives his blade into the Witch Queen, finally killing her. However, before she dies, the Queen uses her final breath to place one last curse on him. She condemns Kaulder to immortality, making sure he will never find peace and will be forced to carry his grief and loneliness forever. Centuries pass, and in the present day, Kaulder is still alive. He continues working as a witch hunter, enforcing the ancient rules between witches and humans. At the moment, he is traveling on an airplane when something catches his attention. He exhales against the window, and a magical symbol appears in the fogged glass, warning him that witchcraft is nearby. To locate the source, Kaulder uses a small pin and a glass of water like a magical compass. It leads him to a woman sitting on the plane. To get rid of the passenger beside her, Kaulder casually spills water onto the man's lap, forcing him to leave his seat. Kaulder then discovers that the woman is carrying ancient runes in her bag. These runes are unstable, and their magic is creating a violent storm outside. If they are not stopped quickly, the plane will crash. Right on cue, the aircraft begins shaking violently as the storm grows stronger. Kaulder grabs the runes and shuts down their power, and almost immediately, the sky clears and the danger disappears. Later, Kaulder visits his longtime friend, the 36th Dahlin, who also serves the Axe and Cross organization. Through their conversation, it becomes clear that witches still exist in the modern world. They are allowed to live among humans, but only under strict rules. As long as they do not use magic to harm people, Kaulder leaves them alone. His job is not to destroy every witch, but to step in whenever the balance between both worlds is threatened. The 36th Dahlin is preparing to retire after 50 years of loyal service, so Kaulder gives him an antique pen as a farewell gift and a token of respect. During the visit, Kaulder also learns that his friend has already chosen his replacement. The new successor is a young man who will become the 37th Dahlin, and he promises that he will watch over Kaulder from now on. After their meeting, the 36th Dahlin takes a taxi home, unaware that a mysterious figure named Belial is watching him from a distance. The next day, Kaulder receives a phone call with devastating news. The 36th Dahlin has died in his sleep. Deeply shaken by the loss, Kaulder attends the ceremony where the young successor is officially marked as the 37th Dahlin. A burning symbol is placed onto his arm, completing the ritual and confirming his new role. After the ceremony, Kaulder and the new Dahlin go to the dead man's apartment to investigate. At first, Kaulder checks for magical traces using his usual methods. He breathes against the window and also tests the room with a lighter, searching for signs of elemental magic. Nothing appears unusual. But just as he is about to leave, Kaulder spots 3 dead insects on the floor. That small detail feels wrong to him. He spreads a special powder across the floor, and suddenly, a hidden pentagram is revealed. Seconds later, the symbol erupts and glowing runes appear across the walls. Now there is no doubt. The apartment has been cursed with rare black magic, meaning the 36th Dahlin did not die naturally. He was murdered. Kaulder continues searching the room and realizes that the antique pen he gave his friend is missing. He also finds a book marked with a bloody fingerprint, which makes him briefly suspect the new Dahlin. But the young man quickly proves his innocence by showing Kaulder his badly burned hands. He explains that when he was a child, witches set his home on fire, and Kaulder was the one who rescued him from the flames. This makes it clear that the new Dahlin has his own painful history with witchcraft. After that, the two of them head to a local bakery. They force their way into the kitchen, where strange people are preparing food with disturbing magical ingredients. Inside, they find a powerful witch named Max, who has been selling illegal magical stimulants. As soon as Max realizes Kaulder is there, he tries to escape by transforming into a swarm of butterflies. But Kaulder is ready for him and traps the butterflies inside a jar, stopping his escape. Max claims he knows nothing about anyone using dark magic, but Kaulder presses him with a dangerous tone, making it clear that lying would be a bad idea. Finally, Max admits that he recently sold a forbidden herb to a stranger. Since Max is blind, he cannot describe the man's face, but he remembers the smell. The stranger carried the scent of arsenic mixed with rotten apples. That clue gives Kaulder a lead. He believes the killer may be hiding in a funeral home located near an apple tree. Wanting to keep the new Dahlin out of danger, Kaulder sends him home and decides to investigate the place by himself. Meanwhile, a young boy walking through the street notices a trail of gummy bears scattered along the ground. Curious, he follows them and soon arrives at a bright, inviting house with a beautiful tree covered in candy-like gummies. From nearby, Belial watches silently. The child reaches out to take the sweets, but Kaulder arrives just in time and stops him. He reveals that the gummies are not candy at all. They are actually rotten apples hidden by magic. As the illusion breaks, the charming house transforms into an old, decaying structure. Kaulder enters carefully to search the place, and inside, he finds what appears to be a frightened young girl. He approaches her cautiously, but the truth is quickly revealed. The girl is not innocent at all. She is a warlock in disguise, and her real name is Elec. The warlock suddenly turns violent and lunges at Kaulder, managing to drive a blade straight into his hand before making a run for it. But Kaulder is not an ordinary man. The wound seals itself almost instantly, and without slowing down, he chases after Elec. As the warlock tries to escape, Kaulder hurls a knife with perfect aim, pinning him against a wall and stopping him cold. While searching him, Kaulder finds the antique pen that he had given to the 36th Dahlin. That discovery confirms Elec's connection to the attack. Kaulder knocks him unconscious and brings him before the Council of Witches. Once they arrive, the 37th Dahlin cannot hold back his anger and takes the opportunity to punch Elec, finally getting a small piece of revenge for what happened to his predecessor. The council is led by a powerful witch named Gleeser. She performs a card reading to judge Elec's guilt, and the cards confirm that he is involved. But Kaulder is not satisfied with such a simple answer. He points out that the spell used against the 36th Dahlin was far too advanced for Elec to have handled alone. Someone else must be behind him. Gleeser, however, refuses to listen. Instead of investigating further, she summons a horrifying creature known as the Sentinel. Without a trace of mercy, she feeds Elec to the beast, ending him before Kaulder can get more answers. As Kaulder watches this happen, something catches his eye. There is a dead insect stuck to Gleeser's clothing. That tiny detail gives him a new thought. He returns to examine the body of the 36th Dahlin more carefully. This time he uses a carved candle to test for hidden magic. The candle reacts, proving that some kind of spell is still present. Kaulder then checks Dahlin's neck and finds another dead insect. That discovery changes everything. The 36th Dahlin is not truly dead. He is trapped under an old form of black magic, a curse designed to make him appear dead while keeping him imprisoned in a terrible state. There is only one way to break the curse. They must kill the warlock who cast it, but since Elec has already been destroyed, it becomes clear that Elec was not the true mastermind. He had only been serving someone else. Kaulder then notices a small cut on Dahlin's finger. Remembering the book from the apartment, he returns to examine it again. This time, he realizes the bloody fingerprints were not random. They had been placed deliberately, forming a hidden message that says, "Remember your death." Since Kaulder has no clear memory of his earliest life and the moment he was cursed, he decides to seek help from someone who can unlock what is buried inside his mind. He goes to a witch bar, but the moment he enters, nearly every witch inside panics and leaves. His reputation is enough to empty the room. Only the owner, Chloe, remains behind. Kaulder asks her to perform a memory spell. Chloe is reluctant because helping a witch hunter feels wrong to her. After all, Kaulder has spent centuries hunting witches, but when he explains that he is trying to save an old friend, she softens and agrees. Chloe prepares the spell by placing a memory potion inside a cherry. Kaulder eats it, and in an instant, his mind is pulled backward. He finds himself once again inside the cursed forest from centuries ago. There he sees something disturbing, his own burned corpse kneeling on the ground. Before he can understand what he is seeing, Belial suddenly appears and tears him out of the vision. Kaulder wakes to find himself chained to the floor. Thinking fast, he breaks his own fingers so he can slip his hand out of the cuffs. Once free, he goes after Belial, and the two clash in a violent fight, but Kaulder is still trapped between reality and the effects of the memory spell. His vision keeps twisting, and hallucinations flash before his eyes, making it difficult for him to defend himself properly. Belial takes advantage of Kaulder's weakened state and sets the bar on fire. Chloe rushes to pull Kaulder out of the trance, but he is too confused to recognize her. In his mind, she looks like the Witch Queen, and he nearly kills her. At the last second, Chloe blows a powder into his face, breaking the illusion and waking him up. Kaulder tries to capture Belial again, but Belial opens a hole in the floor made of roots and disappears through it. Chloe grabs a fire extinguisher and tries desperately to save her bar, but the flames spread too quickly. Everything she built is destroyed. Heartbroken and furious, she tells Kaulder that maybe everyone was right about him. Maybe he really is a monster. Later that night, Chloe is alone in her apartment when she hears a strange noise. Suddenly, the lights burst one by one, throwing the room into darkness. Roots rip open the floor beneath her and begin dragging her down, as if the earth itself is pulling her into hell. She fights with everything she has, trying to break free. Then she sees Kaulder's hand reaching out to save her. But just as she grabs for it, she wakes up and realizes she is inside the cathedral. Kaulder and the 37th Dahlin have been researching Belial, trying to understand who they are dealing with. Kaulder asks Chloe for help again. This time, he appeals to her anger, telling her that helping them is the best way to get revenge for the destruction of her bar. Chloe agrees, but there is a problem. With her bar gone, she no longer has the ingredients needed to make the potion, so she takes Kaulder to the home of a friend who might have what they need. When they arrive, Chloe is crushed to find her friend dead. The place has been attacked, and all the important magical plants have been stolen. Then her dead friend's phone rings. Chloe answers it, but the voice on the other end belongs to Belial. He delivers a threatening message, warning them that more attacks are coming. With no other options left, Kaulder decides to visit a dangerous witch named Danique. Danique agrees to lend them the plants they need, but the meeting is not as simple as it seems. While Chloe is distracted and checking the ingredients, Kaulder suddenly begins seeing visions of his dead family. The images feel so real that he becomes completely lost in them. It turns out Danique has betrayed them. Her people grab Chloe, while Kaulder is trapped inside a memory spell. For a brief moment, Kaulder is overwhelmed with happiness because he can see his family again. He wants to stay in that illusion, but Chloe refuses to let him disappear inside it. She keeps calling to him, pushing him, talking to him until he finally snaps awake. Back in the real world, Kaulder realizes Danique's men are dragging him away. He reacts instantly, overpowering them and knocking them all down. Then he finds Chloe and frees her before turning his attention to Danique. Under pressure, Danique swears she does not know Belial's real plan. She only helped him get the plants he asked for. Kaulder chooses to leave without punishing her, but Chloe is not willing to let Danique walk away untouched. As payback, she steals Danique's magical gem and destroys it. The moment the gem breaks, Danique's illusion vanishes, revealing her true hideous face beneath the glamour. Afterward, Kaulder speaks with Chloe and tells her what he has figured out. She is a dreamwalker, which means she should not need potions to enter someone's mind. Chloe admits that she is afraid of her own power. The last time she used it, she entered her brother's mind, and he died. Because of that, she has avoided using her ability ever since. Kaulder takes her to a sacred place where the history of witches is preserved. There, he teaches her more about her own legacy and reminds her that his immortality makes him the safest person for her to practice on. Since he cannot die, she can enter his mind without fearing the same outcome. With Kaulder guiding her, Chloe finally uses her power. Together, they return to the night of the curse. Once again, they see Kaulder's burned body kneeling in the forest. When his fellow hunters approach it, the corpse suddenly lets out a terrifying roar. When the first Dahlin attempted to destroy the Witch Queen's heart, Kaulder's body reacted instantly. He screamed in unbearable pain, revealing the terrible truth. If they destroyed the heart, Kaulder would die with it. Because of that, the heart was not destroyed. Instead, it was hidden away. Chloe quickly understands what this means. Belial did not kill the 36th Dahlin randomly. He targeted him because the old Dahlin knew where the queen's heart had been kept. Now Belial plans to use that heart to bring the Witch Queen back into the world. Meanwhile, Belial captures Max and takes him to the ancient woods. There, he pins Max against a tree and prepares him as a sacrifice. With the queen's heart in his possession, Belial begins the ritual to summon her back. Back at the cathedral, Kaulder is furious. He storms in and confronts the 37th Dahlin, demanding to know why the axe and cross kept the truth from him for centuries. Nobody had ever told him that the Witch Queen's heart still existed, and Kaulder feels betrayed by the very organization he has served for so long. The young Dahlin explains that the 36th Dahlin had recently been thinking about destroying the heart. He believed it might finally free Kaulder from his immortal curse, even if it meant ending his life. The 37th Dahlin then gives Kaulder a useful lead. Belial's truck has been located, and they can track where he went. A short time later, Kaulder reaches the woods. There he finds Max, but something is horribly wrong. Max has been taken over by the Witch Queen. Suddenly, Chloe appears behind Kaulder, and for a moment he is distracted. But then the illusion collapses. It was Belial tricking him. Belial attacks Kaulder with fire magic and follows it with gunshots, trying to finish him off. Kaulder reacts faster than expected and throws a knife, killing Belial before he can continue. But the momentary distraction gives the queen the opening she needs. She drives a root into Kaulder's body and pulls the immortality out of him. She reveals that immortality was never truly a gift. Kaulder had only been carrying her power all these years, keeping it alive until she could reclaim a body. Max's form begins to collapse and twist, transforming into the Witch Queen herself. Now restored, she attacks Kaulder with a storm of magical insects. Kaulder fires back, but the queen slips away into the tree and vanishes. Kaulder rushes back to the city and finds that the 36th Dahlin has finally awakened from the curse. But Kaulder cannot celebrate. He knows the queen is going to unleash a new black plague, and without immortality, he fears he may not be able to stop her. The 36th Dahlin reminds him that he defeated her once before. He urges Kaulder not to give up and tells him he can do it again. Motivated by his old friend's faith in him, Kaulder prepares for war. He retrieves a legendary sword and gathers several powerful runes to arm himself properly. Then he leaves with Chloe and the 37th Dahlin, heading toward the council chamber where the plague tree has been hidden away from dangerous hands. When they arrive, they find Gleeser dead. This confirms their worst fear. The Witch Queen is already there, and she has come to release the plague. They follow a hidden passage that leads down into the caves beneath the council room, where imprisoned witches had once been kept. Kaulder smashes through a wall and discovers Alec's body. Even after death, his body is being used to chant the plague spell. Chloe enters Alec's mind to stop the chanting from within, but outside, the sentinel appears. Kaulder and the Dahlin open fire on the creature, but the bullets are useless. The sentinel barely reacts. It knocks Kaulder aside, but he quickly gets back up, leaps onto the creature, and drives his sword into it. Then he shoots directly into its weak point, causing the monster to explode. Inside Alec's mind, Chloe approaches him and tries to stab him, but Alec attacks first, jumping on her and forcing her down, trying to kill her before she can stop the spell. Chloe struggles against him, fighting for her life. Finally, she manages to push him back and throws him into the root hole. The moment he falls in, the chanting stops and the plague spell is interrupted. As Chloe returns to the real world, Kaulder goes after the Witch Queen. The queen traps him inside a terrifying illusion, forcing him to fight in a ruined, post-apocalyptic version of the world. This time, Kaulder is mortal, so every strike actually injures him. Each hit leaves real scars and wounds on his body. Still, he refuses to back down. After a fierce exchange, Kaulder manages to stab the queen, but the attack only breaks the illusion. Back in reality, Kaulder uses one of his runes to set his sword on fire. He strikes the Witch Queen and knocks her down again. For a moment, it looks like he is finally about to finish her. But just as he prepares to deliver the killing blow, the 37th Dahlin appears, holding Chloe at gunpoint. The truth comes out. The 37th Dahlin is also a witch, though he was born without the ability to use magic. The witches Kaulder killed years ago, the ones who burned his childhood home, were actually his parents. His whole story had been twisted by revenge. He shoots Kaulder and hands Chloe over to the Witch Queen. The queen immediately uses Chloe to begin the chant again, and this time the plague is released across the city. The 37th Dahlin expects a reward. He believes the queen will finally grant him magical power. But the Witch Queen has no respect for anyone without magic. To her, he is worthless. She kills him with her swarm without hesitation. While Kaulder lies unconscious, he dreams of his family. Instead of pulling him deeper into grief, they give him strength. They encourage him to rise again and keep fighting. Their presence reminds him that his pain does not have to be the end of him. Kaulder wakes up and reaches for the weather rune he took from the plane earlier. He attaches its power to his sword, charging the weapon with lightning. Then he throws the electrified blade straight at the Witch Queen. The attack strikes true, destroying her completely and returning immortality to Kaulder. As his wounds begin to heal, the plague spreading through the city disappears. The queen's body collapses into ash, but her heart continues to beat. Kaulder raises his sword, ready to destroy it once and for all, even if doing so means ending his own life. But Chloe stops him. She tells him the world still needs him. There are still dangerous witches out there, and someone has to stand between them and innocent people. She also promises that she will guard the heart and make sure he does not have to face eternity alone anymore. Sometime later, Kaulder meets with the 36th Dalan and tells him that he is finished working for the organization. His loyalty to the axe and cross has come to an end. After that, Kaulder leaves with Chloe, and together they head off toward whatever threat waits for them next. You ever start a movie for one reason, and then halfway through you realize that reason is barely even the movie? That was kind of my experience with The Last Witch Hunter. I went in partly because of Michael Caine. Not fully because of him, but enough that his name being there made me more curious than I probably would have been otherwise. And then pretty quickly, you realize, okay, Caine is here, yes, but this is not his movie. This is not one of those watch it for Michael Caine situations. He's more like the classy decoration on a very loud supernatural action cake. The real center, obviously, is Vin Diesel. And that already sets a very specific expectation. Because when you see Vin Diesel in a movie about an immortal witch hunter, you're not expecting delicate emotional drama. You're not expecting some quiet, elegant meditation on grief and eternal life. You're expecting gravel-voiced confidence, big fantasy nonsense, dark rooms, magical explosions, and probably at least one scene where Diesel looks at something impossible and reacts like he's mildly annoyed rather than terrified. And honestly, that's pretty much the lane this movie is driving in. I didn't go into The Last Witch Hunter expecting a masterpiece. I don't think most people did. The title alone tells you the kind of movie you're about to watch. It sounds like something you'd find on late-night cable, or something you put on when you want dark fantasy without having to do too much thinking. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Sometimes a movie just needs to give you a cursed hero, some weird monsters, a secret magical world, and enough action to keep your eyes on the screen. The problem is when expectations are already low, the movie still has to clear them in a fun way. And that's where things get interesting, because The Last Witch Hunter sits in a strange middle space. It's not instantly unbearable. It's not one of those movies where you know in 10 minutes that you've made a terrible decision. There are names in the cast that make you lean forward a little. Michael Caine gives it some old-school credibility. Elijah Wood showing up makes you wonder if the movie might get weirder or darker than expected. Rose Leslie brings a bit of freshness. And Vin Diesel, whether you love him or not, does have that movie star presence where you kind of understand why someone thought this could become a franchise. But at the same time, you can feel the warning signs early. This is one of those films that wants you to treat it as a big supernatural adventure, but also not question it too much. It wants to be dark, but not too dark. Serious, but not so serious that the silliness becomes embarrassing. Cool, but in that very mid-2010s studio blockbuster way, where everything feels like it was designed with a sequel in mind before anyone made sure the first movie really worked. So the best way to approach The Last Witch Hunter is with very specific expectations. Don't walk in looking for a bold new fantasy universe. Don't expect Vin Diesel's version of Riddick with witches. Don't expect Michael Caine to carry the whole thing. And definitely don't expect a horror movie that's actually going to disturb you. Go in expecting a casual, slightly ridiculous, supernatural action film with some decent ideas, some questionable choices, and a cast that is honestly more interesting than the script sometimes deserves. Because that's where the movie has its best chance. As serious cinema, it struggles. As a franchise starter, it feels overconfident. But as a lazy night watch, the kind of movie you throw on when you want Vin Diesel fighting witchcraft in modern New York. Yeah, there's at least something there. Not magic exactly, but curiosity, definitely. The movie opens with the kind of setup that sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but also kind of cool. We're thrown back into the Middle Ages, where everything is grim, muddy, diseased, and basically one bad afternoon away from complete collapse. There's plague, death, frightened villagers, ancient evil, and a group of warriors marching into the darkness to kill the source of it all. The Witch Queen, and at the center of that group is Kaulder, played by Vin Diesel. Now, this opening is probably one of the more promising parts of the movie, because it immediately gives the story a larger mythic feeling. It's not just some guy hunts witches. The film wants us to understand that Kaulder's entire life was broken by this evil. The Witch Queen isn't presented as just another random monster. She's tied to plague, destruction, and personal loss. She represents the thing that took everything from him. So when Kaulder finally reaches her, it has the shape of a classic dark fantasy revenge scene. The warrior confronts the ancient monster. The monster is defeated. The hero wins. Except, of course, he doesn't really win, because before the Witch Queen dies, she curses him with immortality. And that's the central hook of The Last Witch Hunter. Kaulder kills the queen, but her final revenge is making sure he can never die. His wife and daughter are already gone, and now he can never join them. He is locked out of death, locked out of peace, forced to keep living while the people he loved remain forever out of reach. That idea is actually stronger than the movie sometimes knows what to do with, because immortality in a film like this could easily be treated like a superpower. And to be fair, the movie does sometimes treat it that way. Kaulder can survive wounds, keep fighting, and walk through centuries like a supernatural action hero. But the real point of the curse is supposed to be emotional punishment. The Witch Queen doesn't just want him alive, she wants him trapped. It's a cruel idea, almost elegant, really. And also, if we're being honest, a little funny in hindsight. Because cursing your killer with eternal life means you've basically created an unkillable witch hunter who can keep ruining witch plans for the next 800 years. As revenge strategies go, maybe not the smartest. But emotionally, it gives the film a strong foundation. The tragedy is there. A man who should have died with his family instead becomes a permanent weapon. He wins the battle, but loses the right to rest. He gets revenge, but not release. That's a solid premise. The problem is not the setup. The setup works. The problem is that the movie has to carry that pain into the modern story, and that's where it starts to wobble. Because in the opening, Kaulder feels like a man forged by loss. Once we jump ahead, he often feels more like Vin Diesel with a cool coat and a supernatural job description. Still, as basic premises go, The Last Witch Hunter has one with real potential. A medieval warrior kills the Witch Queen. The Witch Queen curses him to live forever. His grief becomes his prison. His curse becomes his mission. That's enough to get you interested. Maybe not enough to guarantee a great movie, but definitely enough to make you think, okay, let's see where this goes. All right, let's talk about the thing that makes Kaulder interesting and also kind of frustrating. His immortality, so the guy lives forever. Literally. 800 years of hunting witches, walking through history, watching everyone he cares about die while he just keeps going. On paper, that is a goldmine for drama. Think about it, the pain, the loneliness, the weariness of living while everything else fades away. That is a dark, compelling character right there, and sometimes the movie nods at that. You get hints of his grief over losing his wife and daughter, moments where it's supposed to feel like the weight of eternity is on his shoulders. But then, Vin Diesel happens. And suddenly Kaulder is less tortured immortal and more cool guy who can't die and is really good at fighting witches. There's a tension there the movie never fully resolves. Because if your hero is unkillable, invincible, and largely emotionally unreadable, it's hard to feel stakes. You don't worry if he's going to get hurt. You don't really connect with his pain. You see him fighting, swinging axes, dodging magical attacks, looking annoyed that something interrupted his night, and sure, it's fun, but it's surface level. Now, don't get me wrong. Diesel has the presence for this kind of action. He can look the part, carry the coat, throw a one-liner, and make it look effortless. But Kaulder's curse is supposed to be tragic. The man is supposed to be exhausted by life itself, haunted by memories, carrying centuries of loss. The film tells us this is true, but we rarely feel it. And that's what makes the immortality a double-edged sword. Conceptually, it's brilliant. Dramatically, it's wasted. We're constantly reminded he can't die, can't rest, can't rejoin the people he lost. But emotionally, most of the time, we just see him being capable, confident, and invincible. The result is a character who is cool, yes, but distant. A superhero with a backstory that should make you ache for him, but instead you mostly just nod and wait for the next witch fight. You know he's supposed to be suffering, but the suffering isn't visible enough to punch through all the action and CGI. And that, I think, is the heart of the problem with Kaulder's immortality in this movie. The weight is there in theory, the setup is solid, but the execution leaves him feeling more like a mythology-powered action figure than a tortured immortal man, which honestly is both frustrating and kind of fascinating. Because you can see glimpses of the tragedy, you can imagine the epic story that could have been, but for most of the film, you're stuck with the guy being unkillable, competent, and occasionally brooding. It's fun, sometimes, but it's not tragic. Not really, and that's the key tension of Kaulder's immortality, a brilliant idea that never fully lands. Okay, now we jump from the muddy, plague-ridden Middle Ages straight into modern-day New York. And yes, New York again. Because of course it is. Somehow every hidden magical world in movies finds its way into Manhattan skyscrapers. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense logistically. Big city, lots of people, lots of hiding places. But it does rob a bit of the original Gothic charm the opening promised. So Kaulder is wandering around this modern city, fighting witches who live secretly among humans. That's the fun part. The movie sets up this hidden world with rules, societies, secret bars, and magical laws. It's like a little shadow economy of witches, warlocks, and other supernatural oddballs. They're quietly walking among us, plotting, scheming, maybe even brewing coffee while they decide whether to resurrect an evil queen. I like the idea. The film treats the supernatural as something that exists just out of our sight, not affecting the normal world too much, which is clever because it keeps the movie grounded enough for modern viewers. And yet, it also means that Kaulder's battles are often oddly confined. Most of the magical threats feel like isolated incidents rather than world-shaking events. You rarely get the sense that the stakes are citywide or global, even though this is supposed to be an immortal warrior defending humanity. The hidden supernatural world has style, though. Secret witch bars, dream-walking sequences, cursed relics, and odd magical neighborhoods give the city a layer of mystery. The problem is, the film often gets distracted. One minute we're exploring a magical bar, the next we're in some random warehouse, then an apartment, then another chase through CGI-filled streets. The setting is rich, but the movie doesn't always know how to use it fully. Still, when it works, it's pretty fun. The contrast between Kaulder, this ancient, immortal man, and the modern world adds some humor, some charm, and occasionally a little awe. Watching someone who has lived through centuries navigate Starbucks, taxicabs, and city cops is oddly satisfying. But the modern setting also highlights one of the film's weaknesses. The magic looks good, but it doesn't feel as dangerous as it should. Everything is filtered through CGI, making it flashy, yes, but occasionally hollow. And with Kaulder being basically unkillable, the hidden threats never feel particularly threatening. In short, the modern-day world gives the film a playground full of magical secrets, quirky rules, and hidden danger. It's imaginative and sometimes entertaining. But the city setting also underscores how limited the stakes are, how uneven the pacing can feel, and how much the film relies on Diesel's presence to keep us watching. It's a hidden world with potential, just one that the movie only partially explores. And honestly, I kind of wish it leaned into that a little more, let us peek behind the curtain, see the magic and danger really thrive, instead of just using it as a backdrop for Vin Diesel doing his usual thing. One of the more interesting ideas hiding inside The Last Witch Hunter is this organization called the Axe and Cross. And honestly, the name alone sounds like it belongs on the cover of a dark fantasy comic from the early 2000s. It's dramatic, a little over the top, kind of silly, but also exactly the kind of thing this movie needs. Because if you're going to have an immortal Vin Diesel hunting witches for 800 years, of course there has to be some ancient secret order behind him, keeping records, making rules, and pretending any of this is normal. The Axe and Cross is basically the church-linked organization that helps maintain the balance between humans and witches. It's not just Kaulder running around New York doing whatever he wants. At least, that's the idea. There's a system in place. Dangerous witches are judged. Magical laws are enforced. The bad ones are imprisoned. The peaceful ones are allowed to exist quietly among humans. That part is actually pretty cool, because it gives the movie a bigger structure. It suggests that this hidden witch world has history, politics, law, punishment, and compromise. Not every witch is evil. Not every supernatural creature needs to be destroyed. There's a truce, and Kaulder is not just a monster killer. He's more like the weapon standing between order and chaos. The problem is, the film doesn't dig into that nearly enough. The Axe and Cross should feel massive, ancient, powerful, maybe even morally complicated. This is an organization that has apparently been dealing with witches for centuries, possibly shaping human history from the shadows. That could open up so many interesting questions. Who decides which witches are dangerous? How fair is this system? Is Kaulder truly protecting peace, or is he enforcing the church's version of peace? Are witches living freely, or just being tolerated under threat? The movie brushes against those ideas, but it doesn't really stop to explore them. When the story needs a new threat, another magical trick appears. When the characters are stuck, suddenly there's a rule or object or ability that can move them forward. That doesn't automatically ruin the movie, but it does make the world feel less believable. Fantasy needs rules, even when the rules are strange. Maybe especially when they're strange. Here, the rules are everywhere, but they don't always feel solid. The movie tells us this world has structure, but the structure keeps bending whenever the plot needs help. So instead of feeling like we're watching a hidden supernatural society with deep history, it sometimes feels like the writers are inventing magic as they go. And that's frustrating, because some of these ideas are genuinely cool. The witch bar has personality. Chloe's dream walking is a strong concept. The idea of magical prisons is worth exploring. The Axe and Cross could have been a fascinating organization. Even the whole balance between witches and humans has moral potential. Are witches being protected, controlled, or oppressed? Is Kaulder a peacekeeper, a soldier, or a weapon? The movie has all of that sitting right there. But it rarely slows down enough to dig into it. Instead, the lore becomes decoration. Cool names, cool places, cool magical mechanics, but not enough emotional or dramatic weight underneath. It's world building with a lot of furniture, but not enough people actually living in the rooms. That's why the whole thing sometimes feels more like a video game setup than a movie world. You can almost imagine the side missions. Visit the witch nightclub, track the cursed relic, fight the warlock, enter the dream level, unlock the memory, defeat the resurrected queen. As a game, honestly, that might work beautifully. As a film, it needs to feel more connected. The strongest fantasy worlds don't just throw lore at you. They make the lore matter to the characters. They make every rule feel like it costs something. In The Last Witch Hunter, the mythology is busy, but not always meaningful. It gives the movie texture, sure, but it also clutters the story. So the witch lore is both one of the film's strengths and one of its biggest problems. It gives the movie flavor. It gives it scope. It suggests a larger world beyond the frame, but it also makes the story heavier, messier, and occasionally confusing. You can tell there was imagination behind it. You can feel the creators trying to build a dark fantasy universe that could support more stories. But in this first movie, the world building never fully settles. It keeps moving, explaining, expanding, adding. And after a while, you don't want another rule. You just want the magic to feel real. One thing I noticed about The Last Witch Hunter is that the side characters are sometimes more interesting than the lead. And that's a little embarrassing for Vin Diesel, but also kind of fun to watch. Take the villains, for example. Belial the Warlock is supposed to be threatening. He looks the part. He has power, presence, and a dark edge. And yet the film never really lets him breathe as a character. He exists to be an obstacle, to make Kaulder swing his weapons and use magic. You don't feel his motivations deeply, and honestly, most of the time he feels like a video game boss you just need to defeat. Then there's the Witch Queen herself, played by Julie Engelbrecht. Now, visually, she's striking. The design works. She feels like the ancient evil she's meant to be. But again, her screen time is limited, and the narrative doesn't let her fully develop as a threat beyond the obvious revenge plot. She's iconic in appearance, but shallow in personality. On the other side, you've got quirky magical contacts, people like Max Schlesinger, a blind pastry chef who doubles as a magician. That's exactly the kind of oddball touch that should give the world flavor, and it does, but only in little doses. These characters pop in, give a piece of exposition or a magical trick, and then vanish, leaving you thinking, wait, did that just happen? And Chloe, of course, deserves another mention here. She's a side character, yes, but one of the most grounded and charming presences in the film. She interacts with Kaulder, interprets magic, and drives a lot of the dream-walking sequences. Without her, the world feels even more clinical, more like a series of tasks than a lived-in universe. Even Joseph Gilgun pops up for a brief but memorable eccentricity. He doesn't do much narratively, but his energy adds a flash of chaos that contrasts with the otherwise grim tone. Here's the thing. The supporting cast often carries more personality than the main plot allows. They make the hidden magical world feel real, give you little sparks of imagination, and remind you that there's a lot happening outside of Kaulder swinging axes and shouting at enemies. But the movie doesn't always give them time. Most of these side characters are there for plot convenience, to give Kaulder information, demonstrate a magical concept, or move him from one location to another. They are colorful, yes, but underdeveloped. You want to know more about them. You want them to feel alive, and they mostly vanish once their function is done. So while the main villain and some contacts are underused, the side characters still add a little charm and texture to a movie that could otherwise feel very one-note. They're the hints that if this film had spent more time on them, or if the world building had been tighter, it could have been a lot more engaging. In short, the side characters are a mixed bag. Some are wasted, some are fun. Some are weirdly memorable, but almost all of them are more interesting than you might expect from a Vin Diesel-led fantasy blockbuster. And that says a lot about where this movie shines, not in the hero, but in the small, strange details of the world around him. All right, let's talk about Vin Diesel, because if you're watching The Last Witch Hunter, you're watching him. Like it or not, he's the reason this movie exists. And honestly, it's a mixed bag. Diesel physically fits the role. He looks the part of an 800-year-old witch hunter, broad-shouldered, imposing with that "I've seen everything and nothing surprises me" vibe. When he's swinging an axe, charging into battle, or just walking into a room like he owns it, he's magnetic. You believe that this man could take down witches and dark magic without breaking a sweat. That's Vin Diesel at his core: presence, action, charisma. But the problem is, Kaulder isn't just supposed to be strong. He's supposed to be haunted. He's supposed to carry centuries of grief. He's supposed to feel the weight of losing his wife and daughter and being cursed to live forever. And Diesel, well, he doesn't really do that part. Not consistently, anyway. There are glimpses of the grief and exhaustion in his eyes, the rare moments where it seems like he's carrying the weight of immortality. But mostly, Kaulder is flat, distant, and let's be honest, a little too cool for school. The man who has lived for 8 centuries feels more like your favorite action hero dropped into a dark fantasy world than someone truly cursed by time. And that's where the film hits the biggest tension with him. You're supposed to worry about him. You're supposed to feel tension, like maybe this time he could fail, maybe this battle could matter emotionally. But when your hero is invincible, emotionally flat, and mostly delivering gravelly one-liners, that tension doesn't land. It's fun, sure, but it's surface-level fun. There's also that signature Diesel charm. He throws in the occasional joke, the "I'm too cool for this" vibe, the little side smirk, the glint in his eye. And honestly, some of those moments work. You can see why some viewers enjoy him in this role, even if the movie around him isn't perfect. It's classic Vin Diesel, physicality, attitude, a sense of fun under the surface, but the deeper stuff. The sorrow, the isolation, the centuries of watching everyone he loves die, that never really hits. He stays distant. It's like the character's emotional burden is written in the script, but Diesel's portrayal keeps it at arm's length. So how do you take all this? Vin Diesel as Kaulder is entertaining. He's capable. He's visually believable as an immortal warrior. And if you're here for the action, the presence, the attitude, he delivers. But if you're looking for emotional depth, someone who really feels the cost of eternal life, or a Kaulder who haunts your imagination long after the credits, you're probably out of luck. He's a solid action hero in a fantasy setting. He's not tragic, he's not nuanced, but he's Vin Diesel. And in a movie like this, sometimes that's enough to keep you watching. Kaulder is one of those characters who sounds more interesting in description than he sometimes feels on screen. And that's a shame because the ingredients are there. He's an ancient warrior. He's cursed with eternal life. He lost his wife and daughter. He has spent 800 years hunting witches while the rest of the world keeps changing around him. That's not a bad character foundation. In fact, that's a pretty strong one. You can build a whole tragic fantasy hero out of that. The movie clearly wants Kaulder to feel like a man carrying history on his back. He's not supposed to be just another monster hunter with a weapon and a leather coat. He's supposed to be tired, haunted, maybe even a little broken. Someone who has lived so long that victory doesn't really feel like victory anymore. But the version we get is much colder than that. Most of the time, Kaulder feels less like a man crushed by immortality and more like a guy who has simply gotten very comfortable with being impossible to kill. He walks into danger with confidence. He speaks in that calm, gravelly way. He rarely looks truly shaken, and because of that, the curse doesn't always feel like a curse. It feels like a job perk with a sad backstory attached. That's where the character becomes frustrating. The film tells us he misses his family. It tells us he carries pain. It tells us immortality is a punishment. But cinema is not just about being told something. We need to feel it in the way he moves, in the way he reacts, in the quiet moments where the mask slips. And Kaulder's mask barely slips. There are little hints, sure. A look here, a memory there, a few lines about what he lost. But then he goes right back to being the untouchable fantasy action hero. Cool coat, big weapon, no fear. It's entertaining in a simple way, but it keeps the character at a distance. The strange thing is, Kaulder's loneliness could have been the heart of the entire film. Imagine living for 8 centuries and having every relationship come with an expiration date. Every friend gets older. Every ally disappears. Every Dahlin eventually has to be replaced. The world keeps modernizing, but your grief stays ancient. That's powerful. The movie brushes against that idea, especially through the Dahlins and his connection to the past, but it never really sits with it long enough. It's more interested in the next magical clue, the next villain, the next burst of CGI. So Kaulder becomes more of a functional hero than a deeply felt person. He has motivation, but not enough vulnerability. He has a tragic past, but not enough visible pain. He has a mythic setup, but not enough emotional texture. And that's why he ends up feeling oddly hollow. Not useless, not boring exactly, but thinner than he should be. The character should have weight. He should feel like a walking wound. Instead, he often feels like a supernatural action figure placed inside a world that wants him to be tragic. To be fair, Kaulder still works on a basic entertainment level. If all you need is an immortal warrior hunting witches, he does the job. He has presence. He has a clear mission. He looks right in the middle of all the dark fantasy chaos. But the movie keeps hinting at a deeper version of him, and that deeper version never fully arrives. That's the real disappointment. Kaulder is not a bad character idea. He's actually a very good character idea. But the execution leaves him stuck between two versions, the haunted immortal the story needs, and the cool action hero the movie keeps giving us. And by the end, you remember the concept more than the man. Now let's talk about Michael Caine, because in a movie like The Last Witch Hunter, he's the one who reminds you that the cast actually matters. Caine plays Dahlin 36th, Kaulder's handler, the priest who keeps records, the one who links him to the axe and cross. On paper, it's a supporting role, maybe even a small cameo, but as soon as he steps on screen, you notice the difference. The man brings presence, gravitas, and a sense of reality to what could otherwise feel like pure CGI chaos. He's the calm in the middle of all the witch explosions, the grounded voice in a world of curses, immortals, and dreamwalking. When he explains the rules, the stakes, or just recites a bit of magical history, you actually believe him. He's not flashy, he's not overacting, he just is, and that makes the fantasy world feel more solid. It's easy to see why some viewers came for Kane. You know, he's reliable. He elevates material simply by being in it. Even when the plot is messy, or the exposition is heavy-handed, he gives it weight. You can tell he's trying to do the job well, even if the script doesn't give him much room to play. And yes, the movie is aware of that. Kane's Dahlan is the link between past and present. He bridges Kaulder's centuries of hunting and the audience trying to understand what's happening. When he's attacked, when he retires, when the baton passes to Dahlan 37th, that's the moment the movie tries to make the story feel urgent. And Kane makes that urgency believable. There's also a subtle charm in watching him interact with Vin Diesel. Diesel's often aloof, stoic, larger-than-life presence is softened a little by Kane's measured, slightly wry professionalism. You get the sense that Kaulder may be the star, but Dahlan 36th is the one quietly keeping the whole operation grounded. Honestly, a lot of the movie's credibility comes from Kane alone. Without him, the supernatural bureaucracy, the mystical rules, even some of the emotional stakes would feel far thinner. With him, the world feels like it has some structure, like there's someone who actually knows what they're doing. Of course, he's not given much screen time, and some moments feel like he's just there to drop exposition. But that's Kane's gift. He can make even minimal material feel like it matters. He's steady, he's reliable, and he's utterly watchable. So yes, Dahlan 36th is a supporting role, but Kane makes it the kind of supporting role that leaves an impression. You may forget the CGI battles, the villains, or even the immortality curse. But you remember him, and in a movie like this, that counts for a lot. Elijah Wood showing up in The Last Witch Hunter is one of those casting choices that makes you pause for a second. Not in a bad way, exactly. More like, okay, interesting. What is he doing here? He plays Dahlan 37th, the younger priest assigned to step into the role previously held by Michael Caine's Dahlan 36th. And on paper, that should be a pretty strong position in the story. He's not just some random sidekick. He's becoming the new handler for an immortal witch hunter. He is inheriting a role tied to centuries of secret history, church authority, magical law, and danger that most normal people will never even know exists. That is a good setup. The problem is, the movie does not give him enough weight. Elijah Wood has a naturally interesting screen presence. There is always something slightly nervous, observant, and intelligent about him, and that could have worked really well here. Dahlan 37th should feel like someone stepping into shoes that are too big for him. He should be dealing with pressure, fear, curiosity, maybe even doubt about the whole axe and cross system. But most of that stays in the background. Instead, he is mainly used as the new priest in the room. He follows Kaulder, provides information, reacts to supernatural danger, and helps move the investigation forward. Functionally, he does his job, but emotionally, the character does not really open up. And that is frustrating because the transition from Dahlan 36 to Dahlan 37th could have been one of the movie's better dramatic threads. Michael Caine's character has history with Kaulder. There is trust there, a rhythm, a sense of old friendship. Then Elijah Wood comes in as the replacement, and you can feel the movie trying to create that new partner energy. But it never fully develops. Kaulder should have to adjust to him. Dahlan 37th should have to prove himself. Their relationship should have friction, maybe even some emotional awkwardness. After all, Kaulder is immortal. He has done this before. He has seen Dahlans come and go. For him, this is not just a staffing change. It is another reminder that everyone around him is temporary. That idea is sitting right there. The film barely touches it. Wood is not bad in the role. That is important to say. He is competent. He fits the priestly look better than you might expect, and he brings enough seriousness to keep the character from feeling completely disposable. But he is also underwritten. He is not given many memorable lines, not many strong emotional beats, and not enough room to become a real counterweight to Kaulder, so he ends up feeling a little wasted. There are moments where you almost wonder if the movie cast Elijah Wood because his presence alone brings a bit of genre credibility. He has that connection to fantasy and horror-adjacent material, and seeing him in a supernatural film creates certain expectations. You think maybe he will bring something strange or layered to the story. Instead, the role is mostly practical. He is there because the plot needs a Dahlan 37th. That does not make him useless. He adds structure. He gives Kaulder someone to speak to. He helps represent the axe and cross after Dahlin 36th is removed from the main action. But for a character with such an interesting title and position, he feels surprisingly thin. And that is the recurring issue with The Last Witch Hunter. The movie keeps introducing pieces that sound better than they play. Dahlin 37th should matter more. Elijah Wood should have more to do. The handoff between the old Dahlin and the new one should carry emotional meaning. But the film is too busy chasing magical clues, villains, and franchise setup to let that relationship breathe. So Elijah Wood's performance is fine. The casting is interesting. The concept behind his character is genuinely promising. But Dahlin 37th never becomes as memorable as he should be. He feels less like a fully developed character and more like another missed opportunity in a movie already full of them. Rose Leslie's Chloe is one of the few characters in The Last Witch Hunter who actually makes the movie feel a little less stiff. And I don't mean she completely fixes it. She doesn't. The script still gives her limited space, and the film still has that habit of reducing interesting people into plot tools. But whenever Chloe enters the story, there's a noticeable shift. The movie loosens up a bit. It becomes less about ancient organizations and Vin Diesel brooding through exposition, and more about someone who actually lives inside this hidden magical world. That matters. Chloe is a witch, but she's not framed as some grand evil figure or mysterious ancient villain. She feels more grounded than that. She runs in the supernatural underground. She has her own place, her own survival instincts, her own attitude toward Kaulder and his whole witch-hunting reputation. She's not impressed in the way everyone else seems expected to be, and honestly, that makes her refreshing. Rose Leslie brings a kind of sharp, slightly guarded energy to the role. She doesn't overplay it. She gives Chloe enough warmth to be likable, but enough edge to keep her from becoming just the helpful magical woman. There's a bit of tension in how she interacts with Kaulder, because she belongs to the world he's spent centuries controlling. That alone gives their scenes a little more bite than the movie often earns elsewhere. And her dream-walking ability is easily one of the better ideas in the film. Instead of making her power just another flashy combat trick, the movie ties Chloe to memory, dreams, and buried truth. That gives her a function beyond fighting. She becomes the person who can take Kaulder into the parts of himself he cannot reach alone. In a better, more emotionally focused version of this movie, Chloe could have been the key to unlocking the whole tragedy of Kaulder's immortality. The movie almost gets there. Almost. There are moments where Chloe's presence points towards something more interesting. A story about trust between a witch and a witch hunter, about the hidden communities Kaulder judges from the outside, about magic that is personal rather than just explosive. Her scenes have texture. Her connection to the witch world makes the setting feel less like a stack of rules and more like an actual place where people live. The hookah bar scenes help with that too. They give the movie some flavor, some social atmosphere, a little weirdness. You get the sense that there is a whole magical nightlife happening just under the surface of the city, and Chloe is our doorway into it. That's the kind of stuff this film needed more of. And then there's that light bulb scene where Chloe tries to defend herself from a threatening spirit. It's a small moment compared to the big CGI battles, but it has more personality than most of them. It's quiet, tense, visual, and clever. You understand what she's doing by watching her do it. No one has to stop and explain every detail. That scene makes Chloe feel capable in a way the script doesn't always manage elsewhere. Still, she is underused. There's no way around it. The film gives her enough to stand out, but not enough to fully own her place in the story. Sometimes she feels like a genuinely interesting witch with her own perspective. Other times, she slides into the usual side character job, help the hero, explain the magic, move the plot forward. That's disappointing, because Rose Leslie has enough presence to make Chloe more than that. She brings charm, alertness, and a little spark to a movie that can get weighed down by its own mythology. She's not the deepest character in the world, but she feels more alive than a lot of the material around her. When she's on screen, the film becomes easier to watch. So no, Chloe isn't a fully realized character, but she is one of the better ingredients. She gives The Last Witch Hunter some attitude, some softness, some mystery, and a glimpse of the more interesting witch world story hiding underneath all the noise. The supporting cast in The Last Witch Hunter is honestly one of the more interesting parts of the movie, even when the film doesn't give them enough room to breathe. That's the weird thing here. You look at the cast list and think, okay, there's actually some talent in this. Michael Caine, Elijah Wood, Rose Leslie, Olafur Darri Olafsson, Julie Engelbrecht, Joseph Gilgun. These are not background faces with nothing to offer. There are actors here who could have made this world feel strange, dangerous, funny, elegant, and unsettling. And every now and then they do. Olafur Darri Olafsson, for example, brings a real heaviness to Belial. He has that physical presence where he doesn't need to do too much to seem threatening. He looks like someone who belongs in a darker, nastier version of this movie. When he shows up, the film gets a little more texture, a little more menace. The problem is, like a lot of the villains here, he's more of a shape than a fully developed character. He feels dangerous, yes, but the script doesn't let him become memorable in the way he could have been. Julie Engelbrecht as the Witch Queen has a similar issue. Visually, she works. The design, the makeup, the whole ancient evil presence, it gives the movie one of its stronger fantasy images. You understand immediately why the film wants her to be this legendary threat, but as a character, there isn't much underneath. She's the big bad, the curse giver, the plague bringer, the figure everyone is afraid of. And that's fine for the mythology, but it doesn't give her much personality beyond ancient witch queen who must be stopped. Joseph Gilgun brings a different kind of energy, and honestly, the film could have used more of that. He has this slightly offbeat, chaotic presence that cuts through the stiffness. Even in a brief role, he adds a flash of weirdness, which is exactly what a hidden witch world should have. A movie like this needs those odd little human details. Not everything has to be grim prophecy and glowing CGI. That's why the secondary characters matter so much. They make the world feel less empty. The problem is that most of them are used like tools. One character gives Kaulder information, another demonstrates a magical threat, another shows up to look dangerous, another exists to connect the plot from one scene to the next. They add flavor, but the movie rarely stops long enough to let them become people. And that's frustrating, because the supporting cast often hints at a more colorful version of the film. A version where the witch society has more personality, where the villains have motives beyond revenge and resurrection, where side characters don't just appear, deliver their function, and vanish. You can feel actors trying to bring something to the material. Michael Caine gives dignity. Rose Leslie gives spark. Elijah Wood gives a strange, quiet seriousness. Olafur Darri Olafsson gives menace. Julie Engelbrecht gives the Witch Queen a strong visual identity. Joseph Gilgun adds eccentricity. But the writing keeps most of them boxed in, so the supporting performances become both a strength and a reminder of wasted potential. They help the movie. They make scenes more watchable. They give the supernatural world some variety. But they also make you realize how thin the story is, because these actors are often more interesting than the roles they've been handed. In a stronger version of The Last Witch Hunter, the secondary cast would have been the secret weapon. The witch world would have felt crowded with memorable faces, dangerous alliances, strange personalities, and conflicting loyalties. Here we mostly get glimpses, good glimpses sometimes, but still only glimpses. This is where The Last Witch Hunter really starts to show its cracks, because the idea is not terrible. Actually, the idea is pretty solid. An immortal warrior cursed by the Witch Queen, living through centuries, policing a hidden magical world in modern New York, that's not a bad pitch at all. You can hear that concept and immediately imagine a cooler, darker, stranger movie, but the script never quite turns that idea into a strong story. It has a lot going on, maybe too much. There's Kaulder's curse, the Witch Queen's return, Dahlin 36th's attack, Dahlin 37th stepping in, Chloe's dreamwalking, magical laws, witch prisons, secret organizations, memory clues, old enemies, hidden truths. And after a while, it starts to feel less like a tightly built mystery, and more like the movie is throwing fantasy terms at you and hoping they sound important. That's the problem. The plot is busy, but not always engaging. There are scenes where characters explain things that should feel fascinating, but the writing makes them feel like homework. Someone will mention a rule, then another rule, then a curse, then a loophole, then a piece of history, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I understand the words, but why don't I care more? And that's not because the world lacks potential. It's because the story doesn't give the mythology enough emotional weight. The movie wants Kaulder's immortality to feel tragic. It wants the Witch Queen's return to feel terrifying. It wants the hidden witch world to feel vast and dangerous. But the screenplay keeps rushing through the human side of those ideas. It gives us information, not always feeling. It gives us plot mechanics, not always drama. Even the dialogue has that problem. A lot of it feels stiff, obvious, or just a little too polished in that generic blockbuster way. Characters say what the scene needs them to say, but not always what real people, or even interesting fantasy characters, would actually say. There are one-liners here and there, and a few of them have a bit of charm, but most of the dialogue is just functional. It moves the scene forward. It does not make the scene memorable. And then there's the structure. The movie plays like it wants to be a supernatural detective story, an action film, a gothic fantasy, a franchise origin, and an emotional tragedy all at once. That's a lot to balance. A better script could have made those parts work together. Here, they mostly bump into each other. 1 minute we're dealing with grief and immortality, then we're chasing magical clues, then we're inside a dream. Then we're getting another lore explanation, then something explodes, Then the movie remembers it has a villain. It keeps moving, sure, but the movement doesn't always feel clean. The most frustrating part is that you can see the better version hiding underneath. The doll ends could have been used to explore Kaulder's loneliness. Chloe could have made the witch world feel more morally complicated. The axe and cross could have raised questions about power, control, and whether this truce is actually fair. The Witch Queen feels like a real ancient evil, not just a CGI boss waiting for the final act. Kaulder's mission feels personal because everything around him is already ruined. You understand why he hates this force. You understand why killing the queen matters. The setting is doing half the storytelling for the movie, and then we jump to modern New York. Now, that's not automatically a bad idea. An immortal medieval warrior living in the present day, hunting witches through a modern city, that should be fun. There's a strong contrast there. Old curse, new world. Ancient magic hiding behind glass buildings and busy streets. Secret witch societies tucked away under everyday life. On paper, it works. But on screen, the modern sections feel more ordinary. New York has been used so many times for this kind of hidden supernatural world story that the movie has to work harder to make it feel fresh. And The Last Witch Hunter doesn't always do that. Once we leave the Middle Ages, some of the rough Gothic personality fades away. The film becomes sleeker, cleaner, more digital, more familiar. You still get interesting bits. Chloe's Witch Bar has flavor. Some of the secret magical spaces are cool. The idea that witches are living quietly among humans gives the city a hidden layer, but the movie doesn't explore that layer deeply enough. It mostly uses New York as a backdrop for clues, exposition, and CGI fights. That's where the contrast hurts the film. The medieval opening feels like a world. The modern New York material often feels like a setting. There's a difference. In the past, everything seems shaped by fear and magic. In the present, the magic often feels pasted on top of a standard urban action movie. Kaulder walks through the city, talks to contacts, visits apartments, follows leads, fights supernatural enemies, and the whole thing moves along fine. But it rarely has the same atmosphere as the opening. And that makes you wonder what the movie could have been if it had kept more of that early texture. Maybe the modern world needed to feel uglier, stranger, more haunted. Maybe New York should have been shown as a city full of old magic hiding in plain sight, not just a place where the plot happens. Maybe the film needed more contrast between normal life and the witch world, so every hidden door felt like entering a different reality. Instead, after that promising medieval start, the movie settles into a more familiar rhythm. That doesn't ruin it completely. The modern sections are still watchable. Vin Diesel moving through secret witch society has its own pulpy appeal. But the opening gives the film a stronger identity than the rest of it can maintain, and that's frustrating. Because for a few minutes, The Last Witch Hunter feels like it might become a dark, mythic, plague-soaked fantasy adventure. Then it becomes a modern supernatural action movie in New York. Not terrible, just less interesting. You can feel The Last Witch Hunter trying very hard to become a franchise, not in a subtle way either. The movie has that whole Chapter 1 energy from the beginning. Ancient curse, immortal hero, secret organization, hidden supernatural society, magical rules, recurring priest handlers, dream-walking ally, ancient villain, unfinished mythology. It's all built like the starting point for something bigger. And honestly, you understand why. On paper, this world could support more stories. Kaulder has been alive for 800 years. That alone gives you endless flashbacks, old enemies, forgotten missions, different historical periods, and supernatural grudges waiting to resurface. The Axe and Cross could open up into a much larger organization. Chloe could bring us deeper into witch society. The Dollens could add emotional continuity. The whole setup is basically begging for sequels, spin-offs, maybe even a series. The problem is, a franchise starter still has to work as a movie first, and that's where The Last Witch Hunter struggles. At times, it feels more interested in setting up a universe than telling the strongest possible version of this one story. You can sense the machinery. The ending leaves the door open. The mythology is arranged in a way that suggests future adventures. Kaulder is positioned as the kind of character who could keep returning, hunting new magical threats, uncovering deeper secrets, and expanding the world. But by the time the credits roll, the question isn't really, what happens next? It's more like, did this first one do enough to make me care? For some viewers, maybe yes. If you enjoyed the basic idea, Vin Diesel as an immortal witch hunter moving through a hidden magical world, then a sequel might not sound like the worst thing. There is potential here. A second movie could have leaned harder into horror, tightened the mythology, improved the villains, and explored the witch society in a more interesting way. But the first film doesn't make that future feel necessary. That's the issue. A strong franchise launch should make the world feel too big for one movie. The Last Witch Hunter makes the world feel too cluttered for one movie. There's a difference. Instead of leaving you hungry for more, it leaves you thinking about all the ideas that needed better development the first time around. You can also feel the Vin Diesel factor here. This feels like a deliberate attempt to build another long-running action property around him. He has the presence for that kind of thing, and the concept is commercial enough. Witches, monsters, magic, secret orders, modern fantasy, big effects. It's easy to imagine the pitch meeting. But franchises are not built only from concepts. They need characters people want to revisit, villains who leave a mark. A world that feels alive, emotional hooks that carry beyond the spectacle. And with this movie, all of that is only half formed. The sequel setup at the end almost feels optimistic in a way the film hasn't fully earned. It suggests more is coming, more mysteries, more battles, more witch-hunting adventures. But because the movie itself is so uneven, that promise lands with a shrug instead of excitement. And that's probably why the idea of a sequel feels so uncertain. Not because the concept couldn't work. It absolutely could. There is a fun dark fantasy series hiding somewhere in this material, but this version doesn't sharpen the hook enough. It introduces the world, yes, but it doesn't make the audience desperate to return. So the franchise setup is clear. Maybe too clear. The Last Witch Hunter wants to be the beginning of something big, but it ends up feeling more like a pilot episode with a blockbuster budget. Interesting pieces, decent possibilities, a lead character designed for continuation, but not enough magic in the first outing to make the next chapter feel essential. The strange thing about The Last Witch Hunter is that you can almost feel the ambition behind it. This was not some tiny throwaway fantasy film that accidentally wandered into theaters. It had Vin Diesel at the center, Michael Caine adding credibility, Elijah Wood and Rose Leslie in support, a big supernatural mythology, plenty of CGI, and a clear desire to launch something bigger. The whole thing feels designed as the beginning of another Vin Diesel franchise, and that context matters, because at the time, Diesel was already strongly tied to major action properties. People knew him from Fast and Furious. They knew him from Riddick. He had that established tough guy screen image, gravel voice, physical presence, loyalty speeches, controlled intensity, and a kind of larger-than-life confidence that works well when the right movie surrounds him. So you can understand the thinking. Take Vin Diesel, drop him into a dark fantasy world, give him an immortal warrior backstory, surround him with witches, curses, secret societies, and ancient evil, and maybe you have the next big supernatural action series. On paper it makes sense, but audiences and critics did not exactly treat it like the birth of a beloved franchise. The reception was rough. A lot of people saw it as bland, derivative, and forgettable. Critics were not impressed by the story, the writing, or the emotional depth. Some viewers enjoyed it as casual popcorn entertainment, sure, but the overall feeling was that the film simply didn't land strongly enough. It came out, made some noise, and then faded pretty quickly. And that fading is important, because franchise starters cannot afford to be forgettable. A first film does not have to be perfect, but it does need to leave people wanting more. It needs a character you want to follow again, a world you want to revisit, or at least a villain or final scene that sticks in your head. The Last Witch Hunter has the shape of all that, but not the impact. For Vin Diesel, it also feels like a slightly awkward career move. You can see why he might have wanted another action identity outside of cars and sci-fi antiheroes, but Kaulder never became that iconic new character. He has the coat, the weapons, the curse, the tragic backstory, all the ingredients, but he doesn't have the same memorable spark as Diesel's stronger roles. And that's probably why some viewers saw the movie as a step back. Not because Diesel couldn't carry a fantasy film in theory, but because this particular project didn't give him enough to work with. Or maybe, depending on who you ask, he didn't bring enough to the role himself. Either way, the result didn't strengthen his screen image. It mostly made people compare it to the roles where he had already worked better. There's also that feeling that the movie wasted some of its cast. Michael Caine gives the film class, but he's underused. Elijah Wood is interesting casting, but the role is thin. Rose Leslie has energy and presence, but the script doesn't fully build around her. You can sense talented people standing inside a movie that never quite becomes worthy of them. And when a film has recognizable names, a big fantasy setup, and still ends up feeling forgettable, the disappointment hits harder. That's the larger story of The Last Witch Hunter. It wasn't just received as a flawed movie. It was received as a missed opportunity, a possible franchise that didn't generate enough excitement. A Vin Diesel vehicle that looked expensive, sounded marketable, but didn't convince enough people that this world needed to continue. And honestly, that is maybe the most fitting legacy for it. Not a disaster people passionately remember. Not a cult classic that found its audience overnight. Just a movie that arrived with franchise energy, got met with shrugs and criticism, and then slipped into that strange category of films people rediscover later and say, oh yeah, that existed. For casual viewers, it might still work on a quiet night. But in terms of reception, box office conversation, and Vin Diesel's larger career, The Last Witch Hunter feels less like the start of a new legend, and more like a reminder that star power alone cannot build a franchise. The magic has to be there too. Okay, here's a fun thought. The Last Witch Hunter almost reads like a video game waiting to happen. Hear me out. Kaulder is an immortal warrior with centuries of experience, moving through a hidden supernatural world, hunting witches, battling powerful enemies, unlocking secrets, and discovering hidden lore. That's practically a blueprint for a third-person action RPG. You could imagine leveling up Kaulder, upgrading his weapons, learning new magical abilities, taking on boss witches, exploring both medieval ruins and modern New York, and slowly uncovering the mysteries of the axe and cross. The world already feels like it's divided into zones. The creepy medieval backdrops, the hidden corners of modern cities, secret witch lairs, dark magical bars. You can picture maps, side quests, hidden collectibles, and environmental storytelling that gives you hints about the history of witches, the Dahlens, and Kaulder's long life. Even Chloe's dreamwalking could be a gameplay mechanic. Think Enter Memories sequences where you solve puzzles, navigate illusions, and uncover vital clues. Belial and the Witch Queen could serve as epic boss fights. The magic, the weapons, the cursed immortality, it's all there. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone has thought about it already. The narrative structure is actually suited to episodic challenges. The action scenes, while inconsistent in the movie, could translate beautifully into dynamic combat systems. You'd have Kaulder fighting hordes of witches, countering spells, and surviving situations where death isn't permanent, which is perfect for a game that plays with risk and skill instead of simple failure. Even the pacing issues of the film make sense in this context. In a video game, you can explore at your own speed. The lore dumps, the exposition, the dream sequences, all of that could be interactive and engaging rather than lecture-like. Players could piece together the story as they progress, making the mythology part of the adventure instead of a burden. In short, while the movie struggles with tone, plot, and pacing, the universe it presents has undeniable potential as a video game. If someone made this into an RPG or an action-adventure game, it could be a lot of fun, immersive, combat-heavy, with a dark magical aesthetic and a sprawling world to explore. So if nothing else, watching the movie makes you think, man, this could be a killer game. And honestly, that's maybe the most exciting thing about The Last Witch Hunter. Here's the thing. The more I think about The Last Witch Hunter, the more I feel like this story might have worked better as a TV series. Not necessarily a great one, but definitely a more natural one. Because the movie has too much mythology for one film, but not enough emotional depth to make all that mythology land in under 2 hours. It throws witch laws, secret organizations, magical prisons, dreamwalking, ancient curses, Dahlens, rogue witches, and resurrection plots at you like it's trying to unload a whole season's worth of ideas in one sitting. And that's exactly the problem. As a film, it feels crowded. As a series, that same material could breathe. Imagine each episode exploring a different corner of the witch world. One episode could focus on a rogue witch breaking the truce. Another could dig into the axe and cross archives. Another could follow Chloe into the dream world. Another could show a past version of Kaulder in a different century, dealing with some old enemy who still has unfinished business with him. That sounds more interesting already. The Dahlens especially would benefit from a series format. In the movie, they're a cool idea that doesn't get enough space. But on television, you could really explore what it means for generation after generation of priests to serve beside an immortal man. You could show the emotional cost, the trust, the tension, the way Kaulder keeps outliving everyone who tries to guide him. That kind of slow-burn sadness needs time. The Witch Society also feels like something that should be expanded gradually. The movie gives us glimpses, witch bars, magical rules, hidden communities, dangerous factions, but it mostly uses them as background decoration. In a series, those details could become the main attraction. You could actually see how witches live, what they fear, what laws they follow, and whether Kaulder is really protecting peace or just enforcing someone else's version of order. That moral gray area could have made the whole thing stronger. And honestly, Kaulder himself might work better in smaller stories. In a movie, he has to be the franchise-starting action hero. Big entrance, big threat, big final battle. But in a series, you could let him be quieter sometimes. Stranger, more tired. You could let immortality feel repetitive, lonely, even boring in a painful way. One case at a time, one century at a time, the character might slowly become more human. That's the version I want to see. Not just Vin Diesel walking through New York fighting CGI witches, but an immortal hunter stuck in a world he understands too well and too little at the same time. Of course, it would still need better writing. A TV format alone doesn't magically fix weak dialogue or bland villains, but the structure would help. It would give the mythology room to unfold instead of being dumped on the audience. It would give the side characters time to matter. It would make the hidden supernatural world feel lived, in rather than briefly visited. Even the action could improve. Instead of trying to make every fight look like a final boss battle, a series could vary the rhythm. Some episodes could be horror-heavy, some could be detective stories, some could be fantasy adventure, some could be almost entirely character-driven. That variety would fit this universe better than one overstuffed blockbuster. And maybe that's why the movie feels so frustrating. It doesn't feel like a story with no potential. It feels like a pilot episode that got inflated into a theatrical release. You can see the pieces of a better long-form version scattered everywhere. Kaulder's past, Chloe's powers, the axe and cross, the Dollens, the witch factions, the old grudges, the hidden magic beneath modern life. The movie rushes through them. A series could have lived inside them. So yeah, if The Last Witch Hunter ever had a second life, I honestly think television would have been the smarter direction. Not because the movie demands a sequel, but because the world it hints at is bigger, weirder, and more interesting than the film actually has time to show. At the end of the day, The Last Witch Hunter works best if you treat it like what it is, casual entertainment. It's not trying to be high art. It's not trying to reinvent the genre. It's not even really trying to scare you. What it does do is give you an 800-year-old immortal warrior, a hidden supernatural world, magical battles, and Vin Diesel swinging axes and delivering quips while buildings explode around him. That's a lot of fun if you switch off your critical brain for a little while. And honestly, the movie can be kind of enjoyable that way. You don't need to think too hard. You don't need to untangle complex plots or puzzle over inconsistent world building. You just sit back and watch Kaulder handle witches, deal with cursed enemies, get some exposition from the Dollens, and occasionally get a little humor from Diesel or Chloe's playful moments. It's easy to see this movie working on a weekend night with friends, maybe a pizza or a beer. You'll get some decent action, some colorful CGI, some gothic visuals, a little horror atmosphere, and a world that looks interesting enough to keep your attention. You might even chuckle at some of the dialogue, or enjoy the sight of Michael Caine delivering lines with gravitas amidst all the chaos. The pacing is fast enough to keep you engaged. Scenes move along, fights pop up frequently, and there's always some spectacle to glance at. You're never really bored in the sense that nothing is happening, even if you do notice that the story is a bit formulaic or the emotional stakes don't fully land. It's also forgiving in tone. The movie knows it's over the top at times, and it leans into that pulpy energy. It's not ashamed to be Vin Diesel swinging axes through CGI witches while a secret magical war brews under New York City. It doesn't demand that you take it seriously, which makes it easier to enjoy. So, while The Last Witch Hunter has flaws, predictable plot, derivative elements, uneven pacing, underused villains, it still delivers what you might actually want from a movie like this. Distraction, action, and spectacle. If you go in expecting a masterpiece, you'll probably leave disappointed. But if you go in expecting a light, supernatural action romp with some gothic flair, a few laughs, and Vin Diesel being his tough, charismatic self, well, it actually works. It's casual, it's fun, it's forgettable, and that's kind of its charm. In short, perfect for a lazy night on the couch, not for a deep dive into storytelling brilliance, but sometimes that's exactly what you want from a movie. Alright, let's wrap up the good stuff about The Last Witch Hunter, because there's actually more here than you might expect. First off, the cast. Vin Diesel brings his usual charisma, gruff, confident, a little cocky, but perfectly suited to Kaulder's immortal, action hero persona. He may not be deep, but he's entertaining to watch, and he carries the movie through most of the spectacle. Michael Caine adds gravitas, even if his screen time is limited. Elijah Wood and Rose Leslie bring charm and energy, helping to fill in the gaps where the story doesn't give them much to work with. And some of the secondary cast, like Olafur Darri Olafsson as Belial, pop in brief but memorable ways. Visually, the movie has moments that are genuinely cool. The Middle Ages sequences are dark, gothic, and textured. The modern New York sections, while more familiar, still manage some stylish shots and hidden magical spaces. Chloe's dream-walking sequences stand out as small but effective glimpses of atmosphere and tension. Add in well-designed costumes and sets, and the film has a look that's at least consistently cinematic, even when the story is uneven. The action is another strength. Big, flashy, and often fun, the battles are full of energy. Kaulder swinging axes, spells flying, buildings exploding, it's pure popcorn spectacle. Even if the fights are sometimes repetitive or over-CGI'd, there's enough variety to keep your eyes entertained. And the movie doesn't take itself too seriously, which helps the action feel more playful than exhausting. The world building, while overstuffed, has promise. The witches, the axe and cross, the secret supernatural society, dream-walking, cursed immortality, these are all ingredients that could support more stories or a bigger universe. Even if the film doesn't fully explore them, they give the movie texture and potential, which is a nice change from completely flat blockbusters. Finally, the casual entertainment factor is solid. This is a film that works best if you switch off your brain for a little while. It's not Oscar-level storytelling, but it's fun, pulpy, and visually engaging enough to hold your attention. For a one-time viewing, it delivers spectacle, a few laughs, some gothic flair, and the satisfaction of seeing an immortal hero take on a hidden supernatural world. So yeah, it's flawed, sure. But the cast, visuals, action, and world building make it an easy watch, and they're the parts of the movie that actually stick with you after the credits roll. Alright, now let's get into where The Last Witch Hunter really stumbles, because there's plenty to talk about. The biggest issue is the story and script. The plot tries to do too much, throwing in centuries of backstory, witch lore, magical rules, secret societies, dream sequences, and multiple villains all at once. And the problem isn't that it's complex, it's that it never feels coherent. So much exposition ends up feeling like a lecture. The characters are explaining things instead of acting in ways that make you care. You know what's happening, but you rarely feel why it matters. That ties into predictability. The movie follows a very familiar formula. Ancient evil is defeated, ancient evil returns, immortal hero must stop it, supporting allies help, big final battle. It's comfortable, yes, but also a little boring. You can see the twists coming a mile away, and the villains, even the Witch Queen, never feel truly threatening. Kaulder can heal from almost anything, so tension is hard to generate. Tone is another weakness. The film jumps between gothic fantasy, supernatural action, light humor, and blockbuster spectacle. Sometimes that mix is fun, other times it's jarring. The emotional stakes don't land because the movie keeps sliding back into explosions or CGI mayhem. You never feel fully immersed in either the horror or the tragedy. Speaking of characters, Kaulder himself is one-dimensional. Vin Diesel's presence helps, sure, but the immortal witch hunter never shows much vulnerability beyond brief flashes. Chloe and the Dollens are underused, the villains are flat, and even the supporting cast can't elevate the material when the script gives them so little to do. Then there's the CGI and effects. They're ambitious but overstuffed. Magical fights, explosions, creatures, and spells pile up, and sometimes the result is confusing or visually overwhelming. It looks impressive, but it doesn't always feel integrated into the story. Some sequences start strong and end up feeling like a blur of flashing lights and moving characters. Finally, the pacing. The film bounces between centuries, locations, exposition, and action in a way that feels uneven. Some scenes breathe and work. Others rush, dragging or jumbling multiple story threads at once. By the end, you're left feeling like the movie could have been tighter, cleaner, and more focused. So in short, The Last Witch Hunter has ambition, but it's weighed down by an overcomplicated script, predictable plot beats, inconsistent tone, underdeveloped characters, overstuffed CGI, and uneven pacing. It's flashy, sometimes entertaining, but flawed in ways that keep it from being a truly memorable fantasy action experience. So where does that leave The Last Witch Hunter? Honestly, somewhere in the middle. And maybe that's the most frustrating place for it to land. It's not a complete disaster. I don't think it deserves to be treated like some unwatchable fantasy train wreck. There are too many decent ingredients here for that. The premise is cool. The gothic visuals have moments. Michael Caine brings class. Rose Leslie gives the movie some much-needed energy. The idea of an immortal witch hunter moving through a hidden magical world is strong enough that you can see why someone thought this could become a franchise. But at the same time, the movie never fully becomes the thing it wants to be. It wants to be dark, but it's not scary enough. It wants to be emotional, but Calder's grief never really hits. It wants to be epic, but the villains don't feel powerful enough. It wants to build a big fantasy universe, but the lore gets messy instead of immersive. And it wants Vin Diesel to feel like this tragic, ancient warrior, when most of the time he just feels like Vin Diesel in a supernatural action movie. That's not always a bad thing, by the way. If you like Diesel's usual screen presence, there's some fun here. He looks right in the role. He carries the action well enough. And if your only expectation is watching him fight witches with a serious face while magical chaos explodes around him, the film does deliver that. But the stronger movie is always just out of reach. You can feel it in the Dollens. You can feel it in Chloe's dream walking. You can feel it in the Middle Ages opening, in the Witch Queen's curse, in the secret world of witches living under human society. There are pieces here that could have made a richer, stranger, more emotionally engaging dark fantasy. Instead, The Last Witch Hunter settles for being watchable, not memorable, not especially original. Not deep enough to haunt you afterward, just watchable, and that's why the final verdict is a little split. As serious fantasy cinema, it falls short. As horror, it's too tame. As a franchise starter, it feels overconfident. As an emotional story about immortality and grief, it barely scratches the surface. But as a casual popcorn movie, yeah, it has its place. Put it on during a lazy night, don't expect too much, and there's enough spectacle, weird lore, and supernatural action to keep you mildly entertained. It's the kind of movie you might not strongly recommend, but you also might not regret watching once. So no, The Last Witch Hunter is not a hidden masterpiece. It's not the great Vin Diesel fantasy franchise that maybe it wanted to be. It's a flawed, familiar, occasionally fun supernatural action film with a better concept than execution. It has magic in the setup, but not enough magic in the storytelling, and by the time the credits roll, that's the feeling that sticks most. This movie should have been cooler. It really should have been.